It is a strange, almost surreal moment when someone whose life seems overflowing in family gatherings, laughter, and a steady hum of companionship tells you that they wish they had your life. You, the one who greets the dawn with silence and finds the evening's company in your own thoughts. You, the one whose solitude is not a passing visitor, but a constant, familiar presence. Their words, spoken offhandedly or with quiet longing, hang in the air, absurd and heavy, with invisible meaning. What could they possibly mean? How could they, surrounded by the warmth and noise of belonging, imagine trading places with you, whose world is built of stillness and absence? This is something that someone said to me last week, and honestly, it made me kind of angry. Here is this person who has family, friends, and people surrounding them all the time. People who look up to them, people to call if they need to talk, people to reach out to if they need help. And here I am, with none of that. So let's look at the complex terrain of hearing such a wish, examining the gulf between appearances and realities, the undercurrents of longing that flow beneath us all, and the deep questions it raises about human connection, loneliness, and the nature of desire. At first, the statement sounds flattering. To have someone, especially someone who seems to possess exactly what you lack, express envy for your life. Yet almost instantly, this flattery curdles into bewilderment. You want to ask, do you really know what you are wishing for? Are you sure that's really what you want? For them, your solitude appears as freedom, a life unencumbered by obligations, drama, or the constant negotiation of space with others. They imagine long mornings with a book and coffee, afternoons spent in creative reverie, nights where the only soundtrack is the gentle hush of their thoughts. There is a certain romance in solitude's imagined simplicity, a vision shaped by moments when their own lives feel overwhelming, when the noise and demands of connection become too much to bear. And yet, for you, solitude is not always a choice, and certainly not always a luxury. It is the context in which you exist, the air you breathe, the room in which you sleep and wake. Silence is less a gentle companion and more a fact of life. Your life is the absence of voices at dinner. It is the empty chair across the table, the echo in your home that marks the difference between being alone and being lonely. What they see as peace, you know as longing. What they envy as spaciousness, you recognize as emptiness. It is true that solitude comes with gifts. There is time for self-reflection, for the cultivation of inner worlds. You become attuned to subtle beauty, the pattern of light across the wall, the changing moods of the sky, the intricate design of your own thoughts. You may come to know yourself with a depth that those constantly surrounded by others might never reach. But solitude, if prolonged and when unchosen, can also become a weight. Without the grounding feedback of others, your sense of self can begin to blur at the edges. Small victories go uncelebrated. Private sorrows grow heavy for want of a listening ear. Silence, once soothing, can turn cavernous. You become intimately familiar with the ache of being unseen and the longing for conversation that lingers like a half-remembered melody. So when someone with a life full of laughter and love says, "I wish I had your life," you are confronted with the impossibility of translation. They cannot know what it is to come home to an empty space night after night, to be both host and guest at your own table, to weather holidays as mere dates on a calendar rather than seasons of reunion. Their wish is for a curated version of your reality, stripped of loneliness and filled only with the pleasures of quiet. Yet it would be careless to dismiss their longing outright. Often, those who seem to have everything, such as abundant friendships, robust families, endless invitations, carry their own burdens. The center of attention can be a lonely place. Connection does not always equal intimacy. There can be exhaustion in always being on, in performing the role others expect. Sometimes the noise of community drowns out the voice within, and solitude appears as an oasis. Their wish, then, may not be for your life as it is, but for the space your solitude represents, the possibility of stepping back, of resting, of being alone with one's own thoughts without the need to apologize. What they desire is not so much your reality, but rather an escape from their own. The grass, as ever, appears greener on the other side. But could they truly endure the shift from the center of the circle to the edge, from the warmth of community to the coolness of quiet? Solitude, for the unaccustomed, can be jarring. The day stretches, unpunctuated by conversation. The silence grows loud, and the mind without distraction can turn reflective, sometimes even merciless. The absence of mirrors in the form of other people leaves one to face oneself, unfiltered. Some might find, for a time, a kind of peace in this. But for most, the loss of easy connection, of shared meals and casual touch, would become a source of grief. The heart, shaped by years of belonging, does not quickly adapt to isolation. What was once a fantasy of freedom might soon feel like exile. Ultimately, no one can step fully into the life of another. Our histories, our habits, our wounds and joys are not easily exchanged. The one who wishes for your solitude cannot inherit your hard-won resilience, your learned self-containment, the subtle ways you have made a life inside the quiet. Nor could you, transplanted into their world, immediately flourish amid their crowds and chaos. Each life brings its own textures, its own sorrows and compensations. It is tempting, when met with envy, to feel defensive or even resentful, but perhaps it is also an invitation to reflect on the ways in which all lives contain longing, and to recognize that beneath the surface, we are united by the ache for something just out of reach. So, what can you do when someone wishes for your life? You might listen gently to the longing beneath their words. You might acknowledge the gifts of solitude, but also its cost. You might, without bitterness, help them see that every life holds both beauty and pain. And perhaps, in that moment, you offer each other a kind of grace, the realization that it is human to want what we do not have, and that envy itself is often a veiled expression of our deepest needs. You're reminded that neither solitude nor togetherness is a pure good or pure curse. They are simply different ways of being in the world, each with its own gifts and shadows. To be envied for your solitude is to be seen through a glass, darkly. It is to know that the world is full of misunderstandings, and that the heart's desires are rarely as simple as they appear. But it is also a chance to turn toward your own life with greater compassion, and to recognize the dignity of your experience. Perhaps, in the end, it is not about wishing for another's life, but about learning to inhabit your own with honesty and tenderness. Whether surrounded by family or enfolded in quiet, each of us is searching for meaning, belonging, and a place to call home. In the spaces where longing meets understanding, there is room for real connection. And in those rare, true moments, we see that every life, no matter how solitary or connected, is worthy, and that the greatest gift we can offer each other is the courage to be real.